100 years ago, this was the engine of America. The mills, the mines, the rail lines that built the country. Then it all went quiet. But the empty towns were never the strange part. It's what grew up around them. What people left is still standing out here. Dark factories the size of small cities. Main streets no one walks anymore. And in the quiet between them, the wild came back stranger than it left, hunting in ways nothing was ever supposed to know, in places nothing was supposed to survive. This is the Midwest you never see on a postcard, the one the people who live here keep to themselves. Stay with me, because we're about to uncover its hidden wonders. A world so strange you'll wonder why no one ever told you it existed. First, the people who kept it that way. Around 60 million of them are spread across the middle of the country. But step off the interstate and it empties fast. Small towns and lone farmhouses scattered across land that runs on for miles. They're their own breed out here. They'll dig your car out of a snowbank at 2 a.m. and never mention it again. And they've got names for anyone who isn't one of them. Outsiders, flatlanders, folks from away. Half joking, half not. Most stayed when the work left, on ground their families held for generations. Born here, raised here, and meaning to be buried here too. But the people are only half the reason this place stays with you. The other half is the land itself. And what it does out here, you have to see to believe. Few places on Earth reveal the past as quickly as this, where every storm and every gust of wind strips away another layer of rock. Badlands National Park is a maze of sharply carved ridges and buttes, where erosion continues to reshape the land day by day. Even its name carries a history. The Lakota phrase makosika and the French mauvaise terre both translate roughly to bad land. Every year, the elements slowly strip away the buttes, revealing fossils that make these beds one of the world's most important sites for extinct mammals. The park also holds a much more recent history. During the Second World War, the government took part of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and turned it into an aerial gunnery range, forcing the families who lived there to leave. The evidence is scattered across the land, with spent ammunition on the ground and larger shells slowly emerging as the clay erodes. One of the park's most important places is Stronghold Table, where the last known ghost dance was held in hopes that the buffalo would return and the dead would be reunited with the living. Reaching it requires a walk along a narrow ridge, and the land has since been returned to the Oglala Lakota, whose concerns halted fossil excavations at this sacred site. These cliffs are now home to wild bighorn sheep, though they are not descendants of the herds that once lived here. The original population disappeared long ago, so the sheep here descend from animals brought in from the Rocky Mountains to restore the species. Later, another herd was added to strengthen the population. Built for this terrain, their hooves grip the rock with a hard outer rim, surrounding a soft, cushioned centre. As the rams age, they wear down their own horns against the stone, so the heavy curls do not block their vision. Each breeding season, rival males back away, charge and rear onto their hind legs, before slamming their horns together with astonishing force until one finally gives way. In Michigan's Upper Peninsula stood a town where one company controlled almost every part of daily life. Everything in Fayette belonged to the Iron Company, right down to the shelf the molasses came off, and workers often spent much of their pay back at the company store and doctor. Today little remains but shallow traces of the workers' cabins, while the old town hall still bears the signatures of travelling performers who once passed through. In the Missouri Ozarks, the land takes on a different form, where Tonka Castle stands above forests and clear springs instead of open prairie. Built from stone cut from the surrounding hillside, the castle was the dream of a Kansas City businessman who wanted a grand estate overlooking the springs. Its name comes from an Osage phrase often translated as laughing waters, though its exact meaning has long been debated. The project was nearly over before it truly began. An automobile accident cut Robert Snyder's plans short early in construction, and his sons eventually completed a smaller version of the castle he had planned. Soon after, a new dam flooded the spring-fed pond below. Although the family won its lawsuit against the power company, the legal costs forced them to sell the business that had financed the estate. The castle later welcomed paying guests, but a fire raced through its cedar-shingled roofs and reduced it to the stone walls that still stand today. Stone was the only part of it that could not burn, but at the steel mill in Joliet, Illinois, even the furnaces were carried away. After one of the country's largest steel mills shut down, crews dismantled the entire plant piece by piece, leaving little behind except the concrete foundations. The blast furnaces were rebuilt at other steel plants, where immigrant workers had once kept them running through long, exhausting shifts. Decades later, US Steel gave the site away on one condition: whatever replaced it had to honour the people who worked there. Everything above ground at Joliet was carried off by men with tools. At Chimney Rock National Historic Site, weather is slowly doing the same job. For pioneers heading west, few landmarks were more memorable, and seeing the spire meant the endless plains were finally giving way to rougher country. The Lakota knew it by another name, but emigrants eventually settled on Chimney Rock because of its resemblance to a towering chimney. Its survival depends on a cap of hard sandstone that protects the softer rock beneath, though rain, wind and lightning have steadily worn the formation down over time. Again and again, travellers predicted it would disappear within a few years, yet it outlasted every person who made that claim. Endurance takes a different form in Indiana, where the ruins at Holiday Park preserve pieces of a skyscraper that were dismantled, moved, and rebuilt far from where they first stood. The limestone was quarried in Indiana, carved for the facade of New York's St. Paul building, then returned home after the building was demolished. Rather than recreate the original building, a local artist transformed the salvaged carvings into a carefully planned ruin, where fragments of the past became a new work of art. Far to the west, the Black Hills dominate the plains, where mist, forests and towering granite peaks shape the horizon. Below the hills, explorers are still finding new caves, while wildfire haze can linger beneath the peaks until the Black Hills seem to disappear. Wildfires often blanket the valleys with haze, while cool mountain air traps it below the peaks until the hills seem to disappear. As the mist begins to lift, it reveals another side of the Black Hills, where roaming bison, granite peaks, and open grasslands await in Custer State Park. The park covers more than 71,000 acres, stretching from open prairie to towering granite mountains, with ponderosa pine in the west and mixed grass prairie in the east. That meeting point between forest and prairie supports a remarkable mix of wildlife from bison, pronghorn, and prairie dogs on the grass to elk, mountain goats and mountain lions in the forest. Park rules prohibit feeding them and require visitors to keep their distance from any hoofed animal. Among the granite peaks, Sylvan Lake is the park's most familiar feature, though it was created by people rather than nature. It was made by damming a creek, and the water backed up around the granite boulders, already in the gulch to form a lake that looks like it has been there forever. The rocks, the shoreline pines, and the reflections that make sky and stone seem to switch places all look natural, but they came together by chance, not design. Filmmakers used the lake in a major Hollywood production to double as a location directly behind Mount Rushmore. Beyond the lake, the road winds between towering granite spires, where Needles Highway delivers one of the country's most unforgettable drives. Instead of going around the granite, it cuts straight through it. Narrow tunnels blasted into the rock leave barely enough room for a car, with granite walls pressing in on both sides and pine trees filling the gaps above. Sharp curves and tight clearances keep traffic moving slowly, giving drivers little choice but to take in the scenery. Its namesake is a slender rock spire, about 40 feet tall, with an opening through its centre, barely 4 feet wide. Soon the pavement leaves the granite country behind, leading toward a town that slowly unravelled after its busiest days passed. Built as a railroad water stop, Ardmore also supplied nearby ranches and farms, but when diesel trains replaced steam, the water stopped coming. Near the South Dakota-Nebraska border, the town never recovered, leaving behind brick storefronts, an old bank, rusted cars, and a water tower with no one left to use it. From the empty plains, Michigan's Upper Peninsula pulls the map in an unexpected direction, where one of the strangest pools of water in the country is waiting below the trees. Kitch-Itikipi is Michigan's largest natural freshwater spring, where water so clear and pressurised keeps the sandy bottom in constant motion as submerged tree trunks and large trout drift overhead. The Ojibwe called it the Mirror of Heaven, and the name stops sounding like poetry the moment it comes into view. Fed by more than 10,000 gallons a minute, rising through cracks in the limestone bedrock, the spring remains the same chilly temperature all year. That constant flow means even in the middle of the winter, when ice covers everything around it, the spring keeps moving. Reaching the centre is part of the experience, possible only by a self-operated wooden raft that visitors pull by hand along a cable as the spring glides beneath them. The route then curves along Lake Michigan's eastern shore, where the old fishing docks of Leland Village have worked these waters for well over a century. Weathered shanties, smokehouses and docks still line the Leland River, built by generations of fishermen and preserved by families who kept the working waterfront alive. Carlson's fishery carries on the tradition from one of those shanties, smoking Lake Michigan whitefish in the traditional smokers as fishing boats, and the Manitou Island ferry still leave these historic docks. The freshwater world grows even grander as the route reaches Lake Superior, a lake known for its cold waters and powerful storms. It holds 10% of all the surface freshwater on Earth, generates its own weather systems, and can unleash waves large enough to swallow freighters whole. When winter comes, the lake becomes something else entirely. Ice spreads across the lake from the shore inward, slowly sealing off bays and coves. Along Wisconsin's coast, Sandstone caves that fill with waves become lined with curtains of ice, frozen waterfalls, and towering columns each winter. In most recent winters, the caves have remained unreachable, with ice too thin to cross safely, and safe conditions appearing only a handful of times each decade. During those rare winters, the Park Service opens a mile-long walk across the frozen lake, and tens of thousands of people cross it within a few short weeks. Just a few months later, the transformation is complete. In summer, the water along the shore glows an impossible shade of blue that looks more like the tropics than the upper Midwest. Beyond it, beaches, cliffs and forested bluffs line the coast for miles in both directions. Kayakers work along the painted sandstone cliffs of the Michigan coast, the water so clear in summer that the bottom is visible 40 feet down. Lake Superior crosses 3 states and into Canada, and the lighthouses, cliffs and dunes along its shore are part of what follows. After a devastating storm wrecked dozens of ships along Minnesota's coast, Split Rock Lighthouse was built high on a cliff to guide vessels safely through these dangerous waters. It has been one of the most photographed lighthouses in the country ever since. Farther east, pictured rocks line the shore, with sandstone cliffs stained by iron and copper in bands of red, orange, yellow and green. In some places, the cliffs tower above the lake, where waves have carved arches, caves and columns into the sandstone. Among them, Miners Castle is the best known formation, where erosion has been slowly reshaping the cliffs for decades and continues today. Those colours come from groundwater carrying minerals through the stone, and no two sections of cliff are exactly alike. As a result, no section looks the same twice. The coast takes another unexpected turn at the Grand Sable Dunes, where towering hills of sand rise beside the lake. Here, the dunes climb high above the shoreline before dropping almost straight down to the water. Despite the cold climate, they form the longest freshwater coastal dune system in the world, with winds constantly reshaping the sand. The force of wind yields to the steady flow of spring water, long relied upon to power a mill hidden within the Ozarks. Klepsig Mill was built on Rocky Creek, where a narrow rhyolite canyon gave the water enough force to power its turbine, symbolising the self-reliant spirit of generations of Ozark families. He ground corn free for neighbours who could not pay, built coffins from his best lumber for those who passed away, and the mill, spillway, and weir still stand beside the creek today. West of here, monument rocks loom over the plains of western Kansas, like something from a different planet. Yet the chalk formations began as an early ocean floor, formed when seas covered this region. Before the Great Plains existed, an inland sea covered the middle of North America, from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. When the water finally receded, the fossils of marine life became chalk, which wind and rain slowly carved into towering spires and arches above the Kansas prairie. Even today, fossils of sharks and mosasaurs are still preserved in the rock. Monument Rocks was the first site in Kansas named a National Natural Landmark. Although the land is privately owned, it stays open to the public, with no entrance fee, visitor centre, or fence around the formations. Those very chalk beds have also yielded giant clams, several feet across, toothed birds, and marine reptiles unknown to science until they were discovered here. "30 miles east, Castle Rock is a chalk spire in the valley of Hackberry Creek, and it is essentially the same material and the same sea. Like Monument Rocks, it has been slowly worn away by wind and rain, standing alone on the open prairie, with little to shield it from the elements. That erosion became impossible to miss in 2001, when a thunderstorm brought down its tallest section, leaving a narrower spire with pieces of its former height still scattered across the surrounding slopes. Time has shaped more than stone, and one island preserves a way of life that changed little after the automobile disappeared. Cars were banned on Mackinac Island in the late 19th century, after the first one frightened every horse on the island. Since then, the ban has never been lifted. Instead, horse-drawn carriages, bicycles, and walking keep the island moving, carrying everything from luggage and deliveries to thousands of pounds of fudge. Beyond the busy downtown, more than 80% of the island is protected state park, and the trails lead into forest just minutes from the ferry dock. Just offshore, Round Island Light marks the channel every ferry crosses, guiding ships through the passage long before an automated light took over. It was nearly demolished after an automated light replaced it, but a preservation effort saved the lighthouse that still stands beside the straits today. The bridge that crosses those straits, the Mackinac Bridge, is one of the longest suspension bridges in the Western Hemisphere, connecting Michigan's two peninsulas. Stretching for miles above the water, it was once the longest suspension bridge in the world. Today, millions of vehicles cross it each year, linking the upper and lower peninsulas. Yet once every Labour Day, traffic gives way to people on foot, as thousands walk the bridge from one peninsula to the other. The crossing marks the start of a new country, where colourful hills, grazing bison, and Theodore Roosevelt National Park honour the place that helped shape the future president's early years. As a young New York politician, Theodore Roosevelt came to North Dakota to hunt bison, but the Badlands left an impression he struggled to put into words. After losing his mother and wife on the same day, he returned in search of a fresh start, leaving his infant daughter with his sister. He spent the following years ranching, hunting and helping keep law in the territory, experiences that transformed his outlook long before he entered the White House. Yet the past reaches much farther back than the frontier, to Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site, where one of North America's greatest indigenous cities once stood. At its height, Cahokia covered thousands of acres with earthen mounds, large plazas, a cedar post solar calendar, and trade routes that reached from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Its largest earthwork, Monk's Mound, was built entirely by hand, yet the city was abandoned long before Europeans arrived, leaving no written record to explain why. Centuries later, Grand Portage State Park preserved a route that carried people, goods and ideas across the northern forests long before modern roads arrived. Here, the Pigeon River rushes toward Lake Superior, where waterfalls and rapids force travellers to carry their canoes and cargo on foot, giving the Grand Portage its name. At the end of the trail, High Falls plunges into a narrow gorge along the international border, where rainbows sometimes rise from the mist and eagles soar overhead. Following those waters downstream, Enger Tower overlooks Duluth's shoreline and harbour. Norwegian immigrant Bert Enger arrived in Duluth with almost nothing, built a successful furniture business, and left most of his fortune to the city, asking only for a public lookout, built from the rock of Enger Hill itself. Later dedicated by members of Norway's royal family, the tower's native bluestone walls frame sweeping views of the harbour, Lake Superior, and the Wisconsin shoreline. Down at the waterline below the hill, the Duluth Harbour North Pier Lighthouse has marked the harbour entrance from the end of the breakwater for more than a century. Standing at the mouth of the Duluth Ship Canal, its simple white steel tower was built to withstand powerful storms, crashing waves, and winters that can bury the pier in ice. When the cold settles in, the breakwater freezes into jagged ridges around the lighthouse, leaving it surrounded by ice while its beacon continues to shine. Beyond it, ore carriers and grain ships enter one of the busiest freshwater ports in the world, following that narrow channel into Lake Superior. Superior National Forest borders the lake's northwestern shore, protecting a massive expanse of forest, exposed rock, and interconnected waterways. Within it, towering pines, spruce, fir, birch, and aspen stretch across one of the largest remaining forests in the eastern United States, where some trees have stood for centuries. Inland, the Boundary Waters canoe area. Wilderness has no roads, and travel still depends on paddling and carrying canoes between lakes, much as native peoples and voyageurs once did. That journey can continue for days, winding through connected lakes and narrow channels without crossing a single road or power line. The forest is also where most of Minnesota's moose population lives, and where seeing one is a matter of patience and knowing where to look. Even then, a bull moose can weigh as much as a small car, yet move through the boreal forest almost without a sound. Much of the day is spent browsing, feeding on the leaves and twigs of willow, birch and aspen, with an adult eating astonishing amounts of vegetation every day. When summer arrives, they often wade into the waters of lakes and wetlands, pulling aquatic plants from the bottom, while the cold water helps them escape heat and biting insects. Despite their size, moose are powerful swimmers and can dive beneath the surface to reach underwater plants. But warming winters have made life harder, bringing heavier tick infestations that weaken many calves before they reach adulthood. Even so, seeing one in the wild is still an unforgettable experience. The northern forests soon lead into Wisconsin, where a Catholic basilica crowns the highest hill in the southeastern part of the state and draws hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. Known as Holy Hill, the Carmelite Basilica rises above the countryside, its twin Romanesque towers visible long before the road arrives, on the site of a simple log chapel built in the 19th century. Today's basilica features Munich stained glass, a court of heaven mosaic, and an anteroom filled with crutches, braces, and prosthetics, left by visitors who believed they no longer needed them. By autumn, the surrounding hillsides glow with colour, and the basilica rises above the forest canopy before winter blankets the hill in snow and transforms the scene. Back in the Black Hills, Deadwood remains a gold rush town, where old stories still linger through its historic streets and gulch. The town began when prospectors struck gold in a wooded creek, transforming the remote settlement into a Wild West symbol of fortune seekers, outlaws, and lawlessness. Wild Bill Hickok was shot from behind during a poker game at Saloon No. 10, while Calamity Jane became one of Deadwood's most recognisable figures, and now rests beside him in Mount Moriah Cemetery. Today, the town is preserved as a historic district, where restored gambling streets and preserved landmarks keep its Wild West character alive. Gold fades into history, but the search for opportunity carries on along Lake Michigan's shores, shaped by trade, fishing, and generations of lake communities. Unlike the other Great Lakes, Lake Michigan lies entirely within the United States, touching several states and stretching along a shoreline lined with forests, towns, and working harbours. In autumn, the colour along that shoreline is the kind that stops people mid-drive to take photographs. The hardwood forest, burning orange and red against water that runs a cold, flat blue. Beneath the surface, the lake holds countless shipwrecks, many preserved by the cold fresh water, and some still visible from boats above on clear days. Along the Wisconsin coast, Door County reaches into Lake Michigan on a narrow peninsula where Cana Island Lighthouse has guided ships along the eastern shore for generations. Since its construction, the beacon has withstood storms and changing technology, from hand-tended lamps to a modern lens that still turns today as an active navigational aid visible across the lake. Inland, the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe sits on a hillside above the Mississippi River, welcoming pilgrims and sightseers throughout the year. The wooded bluffs above La Crosse overlook the river valley, where a bishop returned from Mexico City with a vision to create a place of pilgrimage in Wisconsin. Opened in the early 2000s, the shrine was built in the Italian Renaissance style, with forest paths, devotional areas along the slopes, and a church standing at the crest of the hill. Its purpose was to welcome both those unable to travel abroad and visitors simply drawn to its architecture, quiet surroundings, and views across the valley. The journey itself unfolds along the hillside, where pilgrims follow prayer paths, families walk beneath the trees, and the church interior reveals a mosaic apse illuminated by shifting light. Ohio does not look like canyon country until it does, and the gorges of Hocking Hills are the reason people drive across 3 states to reach southeastern Ohio. Here, sandstone cliffs, caves, and narrow passages create scenery that feels more like the American Southwest than the Midwest. Among the park's features, Old Man's Cave stands out with its waterfalls, stone bridges, and winding paths through the gorge that carries its name. Nearby, Ash Cave reveals the true scale of Hocking Hills, its enormous recess putting the smaller caves into perspective. The horseshoe-shaped overhang extends well into the hillside, with a waterfall dropping from the rim into the sandy floor below. When European settlers first reached the cave, they found layers of ash covering the ground, left behind by generations of fires burned here by indigenous peoples, with the ceiling still darkened by smoke. During winter, the waterfall freezes, transforming the stone overhang into a cathedral of ice. West across Michigan, the city of Holland celebrates its Dutch roots by transforming into the Netherlands every May during its famous Tulip Time festival. That connection began with Dutch settlers who arrived in western Michigan generations ago, creating a town where traditions from their homeland remained part of daily life. At the centre of that tradition is De Zwaan, a historic windmill brought from the Netherlands and carefully rebuilt in Holland, where it still turns and grinds grain today. The windmill anchors, Windmill Island Gardens, which bursts into colour each spring as thousands of tulips fill the grounds. What began as a small tribute to the city's Dutch roots grew into the Tulip Time Festival, where generations of residents plant and care for tulips across parks, streets and yards as a shared tradition. The festival follows the rhythm of the flowers themselves, shifting with the weather because the blooms arrive on their own schedule. "90 miles southwest of Chicago, the Illinois River has carved something into the sandstone that the state is not supposed to have: Starved Rock State Park. Its name comes from a siege when a band of the Illiniwek tribe took refuge on sandstone cliffs above the Illinois River, where canyons, waterfalls and moss-covered walls still surround the site today. In summer, the canyons fill with greenery as waterfalls slip through the ravines, while winter transforms them into curtains of ice that draw photographers and climbers into the frozen gorges. Another stone formation rises at Scott's Bluff National Monument, where towering bluffs once helped define the path across the frontier. After weeks of crossing open grassland with little to break the skyline, the bluff became more than a reference point. It marked a major turning point on the journey west. The wagon ruts carved into Mitchell Pass by generations of travellers remain visible today, preserving the route that carried emigrants across the plains. Standing like a castle above Nebraska, the bluff inspired travellers to describe it as a fortress or royal seat, a sight that seemed impossible in the middle of the prairie. The North Platte carried travellers east toward Iowa, where the Julian Dubuque Monument honours a pioneer whose story helped define the region's past. Perched on a bluff above the river, a stone tower marks the burial site of the French-Canadian fur trader who allied with the Meskwaki, worked nearby lead mines, and made their community his home. When Julian Dubuque was laid to rest, the Meskwaki honoured him with a tribal ceremony, and the city that carries his name grew around his memory. The monument overlooks the same valley Dubuque knew, with Wisconsin and Illinois across the water and the Mississippi stretching beyond the bluff. That river beneath the monument is the Mississippi River itself, a waterway unlike anything else in the country. From the shoreline, it hardly looks like a river at all. It is too wide, too brown, and too slow-moving for something that carries such enormous volumes of water, draining much of the continent before reaching the Gulf of Mexico. Farther north, Minneapolis is where the river narrows, winding through a city that grew around its power and movement. By the time it reaches the borderlands of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois, the Mississippi spreads into a shifting network of channels, backwaters, and islands that constantly reshape its course. For centuries, the river has served as a major transportation route, carrying boats, timber, grain, and goods through the centre of the country. Its floodplain also supports some of the most productive wetlands in North America, providing habitat for fish, migratory birds, and countless other species. It is that kind of river, one that shapes cities, entire ecosystems, and the wildlife that depends on it. And in winter, bald eagles follow open water south as northern lakes freeze, gathering along rivers where they can often be seen perched on ice and hunting above the current. The Mississippi Flyway is one of North America's great migration routes, carrying birds between northern breeding grounds and southern winter habitats. Along the river, they ride thermals above bluffs, rest in cottonwoods, and dive where flowing water keeps fish accessible. With broad wings, hooked beaks, and powerful talons, these raptors are built for life around the water, while their white heads and tails make them instantly recognisable. They mate for life and return to a familiar nest every year, adding to it over time until some become enormous structures. The eagle population along the upper Mississippi is one of the highest concentrations in the lower 48 states, visible from the riverbanks most days between November and March. Harder to spot, but just as tied to this river, are the beavers, who have been reshaping the calmer channels of the Mississippi for as long as the eagles have been fishing them. North America's largest rodent does not announce itself. Built like a small bulldozer, a beaver can grow several feet long, with dense brown fur, webbed hind feet, and a broad paddle-shaped tail used for swimming, balance, and storing fat for winter. These animals are most active around dawn and dusk, slipping through the water almost silently, and the first sign of a colony is often a trail of chewed stumps or a dam across a once open side channel. Their powerful front teeth never stop growing, and enamel containing iron strengthens the orange outer layer, allowing them to cut through wood throughout their lives. They feed on bark, leaves, and aquatic plants, drawing their food from the wetlands they help create. Along the Mississippi's backwaters, beaver lodges rise above the water as rounded shelters of sticks and mud, sealed with clay to protect the interior. Their dams slow the current and form wetlands that provide habitat for many other species, transforming the waterways wherever colonies settle. They live in close family groups, with parents and young working together to maintain lodges and surrounding waterways. Above the river bluffs in northwestern Illinois, Galena changed little after its lead mines ran out, preserving blocks of 19th century buildings and the hilltop home of a future president. Galena's lead mines once made it the wealthiest town in the region, and the money it earned is still in the architecture, block after block of federal and Italianate buildings on the hillside above the Galena River. When mining faded, the river lost its importance, and trade moved elsewhere. The old buildings survived simply because there was little reason to replace them. Nine Civil War generals came from here, but only one left his house there on the hill, open to visitors, furnished with the family's belongings. Ulysses Grant was working in his father's leather shop here when the war began, a struggling farmer and former soldier with no clear path ahead. Only a few years later, the same streets welcomed him home as a national hero. The whole of Galena's downtown is a National Historic District, and walking it is less like visiting a museum and more like the modern century simply forgot to show up. Cross into Wisconsin and the terrain changes dramatically. Devil's Lake State Park sits among towering quartzite bluffs around a landlocked lake, making it one of the Midwest's most unusual and visited parks. Here, the water rests inside an enclosed valley, with no river flowing in or out, held between towering quartzite walls that rise above the shore and attract climbers from across the region. Along the East Bluff, a natural arch known as Devil's Doorway marks the trail's most recognisable viewpoint, where the ridge opens to the sweeping views that made this Wisconsin's most visited state park. Past the forests and cliffs, the shoreline comes into view, where Sheboygan built its identity around ships, fishing, and the waters of Lake Michigan. Known as the bratwurst capital of the world and the Malibu of the Midwest, it combines a food tradition with an unexpected surf culture, where winter storms send surfers into the lake wearing full wetsuits. At the harbour entrance, the pier brings together the city's lakefront character, from its famous brats and surf culture to the red-capped lighthouse that has guided ships along the shore for generations. The Sheboygan Breakwater Lighthouse extends into Lake Michigan, where winter ice coats the pier and lighthouse beneath its red cap. That shoreline extends beyond the pier into Wisconsin's northwards, where the Peshtigo River cuts through the forest and carries a very different kind of water. Rushing white water draws rafters in warmer months, while calmer stretches unfold beneath pine trees as the river winds farther into the woods. Eventually the roar of the rapids fades, exposing another side of the northwoods, where the only sounds come from the forest and flowing water. Southwest, past where the Mississippi bends into Missouri, a reservoir called the Magic Dragon sprawls through the Ozarks, with more shoreline that rivals some of the world's largest lakes. Its nickname comes from the shape seen from above, where the Lake of the Ozarks resembles a serpent moving through the hills. That unusual outline was created by flooding a river valley and its tributaries, leaving behind countless coves, inlets and channels that turn the lake into a destination built around the water. Every cove is unique. Every arm of the lake turns into something unexpected, and the boating culture that has grown around it over the decades is unapologetically loud and social. Party Cove draws thousands of boats on summer weekends. The annual shootout powerboat race brings another side of the lake to life, where speed and competition take centre stage. Between those extremes, anglers fish calmer arms for catfish and bass, while the Ozark hills above hold limestone caves and forested ridgelines unchanged by the water below. Across Iowa, the small city of Pella preserves its Dutch roots, with tulips remaining at the centre of its identity. Dutch immigrants crossed the Atlantic and founded Pella in central Iowa, naming it after a biblical refuge and shaping the town to resemble the Netherlands on the prairie. That vision lives on today, with Pella's Dutch-style buildings, Central Park windmill, and preserved traditions keeping the connection alive. Each spring, tulips cover the streets, parks and gardens, while residents in Dutch clothing clean the roads before the parade, keeping a tradition passed down for generations. Meanwhile, in eastern Ohio, a small park hides a maze of mossy sandstone passages that most people in the state have never heard of. Nelson Kennedy Ledges is the kind of park that surprises people who expected a trail through flat Ohio farmland. The sandstone formations rise above narrow pathways where fern-covered walls close in, creating cool, shadowed spaces that feel far removed from the fields outside. Named formations like Devil's Icebox and Old Maid's Kitchen take their names from the darkness and cold found within the rock rather than their appearance. Because the ledges hold moisture and shade, plants more common farther north, including hemlock and Canada yew, survive here among the sandstone cracks. Exploring this park requires patience, with winding passages and uneven terrain that make every turn feel like a discovery rather than a routine walk. In another corner of Iowa, a priest spent decades building something in stone that Walt Disney wanted to copy and couldn't. After surviving a serious illness, Father Paul Doberstein devoted his life to building the Grotto of the Redemption, a city block covered in precious stones, fossils, crystals, and petrified wood from around the world. It depicts the life of Christ, each assembled by Doberstein himself, and so impressed Walt Disney that he considered recreating them at Disneyland before deciding they could not be faithfully reproduced. Faith and tradition find a new expression in Frankenmuth, a town founded by German immigrants who built a community that still reflects its origins today. This town has two things it is known for, and neither one is what anyone would expect from a mid-Michigan river town. The first is chicken. Zainders and the Bavarian Inn face each other across the street, where millions gather for family-style chicken dinners with buttery noodles, stuffing and bread in a tradition that has changed little for decades. The second is Christmas. Bronner's Christmas Wonderland, with the capitals reflecting the founder's faith, is the world's largest Christmas store, filled year-round with ornaments, nativities, lights, and every Christmas decoration imaginable. The Bavarian architecture, the covered bridge, the horse-drawn carriages, and the accordion players moving through the restaurant dining rooms are the frame around both of those things. Then, the river eventually meets the open waters of Lake Huron, whose shoreline has been shaped over thousands of years. Often overlooked among the Great Lakes, Huron offers a more understated kind of grandeur. It does not have the drama of Lake Superior storms, the urban presence of Lake Michigan, or the island party character of Lake Erie. Instead, it is home to more islands than any other Great Lake, scattered across sheltered bays and broad expanses of blue. Its cold, fresh depths have also preserved hundreds of shipwrecks, many resting much as they did when they sank. These waters weave through the Les Chenaux Islands, where wooded shores, narrow channels and sheltered coves have long supported life on the water. The name, French for the channels, fits perfectly, as a chain of islands creates a maze of quiet passages best explored at an unhurried pace by kayak, canoe, or classic wooden launch. Some islands are home to year-round residents, while others remain untouched, their pine-lined shores reflected in water so calm it can resemble glass. The cold, clear conditions have also helped preserve classic wooden boats, making this one of the best places to find beautifully restored Chris-Craft runabouts and mahogany launches still cruising the channels today. Each summer those boats come out of the boathouses and onto the water at Hessel Village for the largest antique wooden boat show in the country. The village is also home to the world's first Chris-Craft dealership, and the original boatworks continues to occupy its original dock. During Prohibition, some of these swift wooden boats carried bootleg alcohol through the maze of channels to Mackinac Island, where the sheltered waterways offered a natural advantage. Today, those same passages welcome polished mahogany runabouts, as enthusiasts gather to celebrate the craftsmanship that has defined these waters for generations. Down Michigan's western shore, the Grand Haven South Pierhead Outer Lighthouse stands over a very different kind of harbour. It is the one that appears on every poster of the city, red iron, built on a long pier extending into Lake Michigan, the kind of structure that photographs well in every season. In summer, visitors stroll the pier toward the lighthouse, while winter transforms the tower and walkway into thick ice as frozen spray coats the shoreline. Through every season, the beacon continues to guide ships into Grand River Harbour, while the waterfront behind it fills with people watching the sun set over the lake. South along the Indiana border, Turkey Run State Park puts iron ladders into sandstone canyon walls, so hikers can get to places the terrain would otherwise make impossible. The white-tailed deer move through the forest above and around the canyons, most visible at dawn and dusk when they cross the open ground near the creek. With reddish-brown coats that turn grey in winter, large ears, and the white underside of the tail that gives them their name, they vanish into the forest almost as quickly as they appear. These animals are the most widely distributed large mammal in North America, and Turkey Run's mix of forest, meadow, and creek corridor gives them everything they need. They feed on leaves, acorns, twigs, berries, mushrooms, and tender wildflowers, changing their diet with the seasons as different plants become available. Rarely in a hurry, they often pause at the edge of a clearing, ears turning to every sound before slipping quietly back beneath the trees. Their well-worn paths frequently cross the hiking trails, offering brief encounters before the forest closes around them once again. Across the Ohio border, Lake Erie trades canyon walls for open water, sandy beaches, and a chain of islands that have been drawing summer visitors since before the Civil War. This is the warmest, shallowest, and most productive of the Great Lakes, and in summer it behaves less like a cold northern lake and more like a destination. Sandy beaches run along the Ohio shoreline. The water heats up enough to swim in by June, and the western end of the lake holds a cluster of islands that exist almost entirely for the pleasure of the people on them. The shoreline is also where the Marblehead Lighthouse has been operating longer than any other lighthouse on the Great Lakes. Perched on a rocky point along Lake Erie's southern shore, it has kept its beacon shining through changing seasons, powerful storms, and generations of lake traffic. Its white limestone tower is modest in height, yet instantly recognisable, proving that longevity, rather than size, is what sets it apart from the region's larger lights. The view from the grounds takes in the open lake to the north, and, on clear days, the low silhouette of the islands that Put-in Bay calls home. Closer to shore, Put-in Bay becomes one of Lake Erie's busiest summer destinations, where boats crowd the harbour beneath Perry's Victory Monument, taller than the Statue of Liberty. Beneath the island, Crystal Cave conceals the world's largest known geode, a chamber of pale blue Celestine crystals beneath a winery that still welcomes visitors today. Next door on the water, Middle Bass Island offers a calmer side of the lake. Here, the pace slows, trading Put-in Bay's busy waterfront for peaceful harbours, wooded shorelines and open waters. The clear lake remains unchanged, but the crowds give way to small marinas, secluded coves, and unhurried afternoons on the shore. Instead of lively nightlife, families and boaters come for calm anchorages, fishing, kayaking, and days shaped by the rhythm of the lake. That slower character is exactly what Middle Bass has managed to preserve. Most of Missouri's famous water is loud about it, but Spile Lake rewards those willing to slow down instead. Tucked among wooded hills, it offers a calmer setting where still water reflects the surrounding treeline with remarkable clarity on quiet mornings. It is small and peaceful, and on early mornings the water reflects the treeline with remarkable clarity when the wind and boats are absent. Anglers work the banks and the shallows for bass and catfish. Kayakers drift through without hurry, and the wildlife that uses the lake's edge comes and goes on its own schedule. It is the kind of water that rewards patience more than energy, and the people who know it tend not to advertise it widely. Patience gives way to moving water as Spearfish Canyon winds beside a clear mountain stream beneath towering limestone cliffs. Over time, Spearfish Creek carved this narrow gorge where forested walls rise dramatically above the canyon floor and create a cool, sheltered world unlike the surrounding plains. Frank Lloyd Wright once said he found it more miraculous than the Grand Canyon. The scenic road follows the creek through the canyon, where the cliffs draw so close that the sky becomes a narrow ribbon overhead. When autumn arrives, golden aspens and other hardwoods brighten the lower slopes, their colours glowing against the pale limestone, while the sheltered canyon holds on to fall longer than the hills above. Among its waterfalls, Spearfish Falls is the easiest to reach and one of the canyon's best-known sights. It drops into a narrow gorge near the village of Savoy, reached by a short trail that descends through pine and birch from the trailhead above. At the base, cool mist rises from the falling water, creating a refreshing pocket of air that feels separate from the forest around it. A mile or so along the canyon, Rough Lock Falls takes on an entirely new character. It spreads across the canyon floor in a series of tiers rather than a single plunge, creating the feeling of walking beside a staircase of water. South of the canyon, the four faces of Mount Rushmore National Memorial have watched over the pine forest below for generations. Long before it became a national symbol, the mountain known to the Lakota as Six Grandfathers held profound spiritual significance as part of the Black Hills. After gold drew outside settlers into the region and the Treaty of Fort Laramie was broken, sculptor Gutzon Borglum arrived with a crew, explosives, and a plan to carve 4 presidents into the granite. Years of work transformed the cliff into the familiar faces of Washington, Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt and Lincoln, though the larger vision of full figures was never completed. Today, visitors walk the Avenue of Flags and stand beneath the monument, where the scale of the carvings feels far larger than any photograph can show. The mountain carries two histories at once, and the trails around the base leave room for both stories to be remembered. As human hands reshaped the granite at Mount Rushmore, human engineering later transformed a river valley into Clinton Lake. The reservoir was created to tame repeated flooding along the Wakarusa River Valley, where towns and farms had long battled rising waters. It solved that problem while creating a new setting of wooded shorelines, open water, and recreation that now draws visitors from Lawrence and the surrounding region. Beyond recreation, the lake supplies water and supports anglers, boaters, hikers and campers who use its shores year-round. Its waters hold walleye, crappie, catfish and bass, while bald eagles patrol the shallows in colder months, and deer, turkey and herons roam the surrounding woods. The Wakarusa River, which feeds the lake from the west, still carries its own character beyond the shoreline, flowing through the country that existed before the reservoir. Away from the lake, it moves slowly through the Kansas tallgrass prairie, where channel catfish, white bass, and canoeists follow its quiet bends. The water that carved the valley also exposes the layers beneath it, as Horseshoe Bluff rises above the river with stone formations that record ages of change. Few expect canyon country in Iowa, but this is an exception. A quarry where exposed Ordovician dolomite reveals when the region lay beneath a tropical sea. Surrounding the bluff, the mines of Spain preserve forests, prairies, and river overlooks along the Mississippi, with Horseshoe Bluff as its geological centerpiece. The region's limestone later became part of Joliet Correctional Center, a historic prison recognized for its massive stone walls and lasting presence. The stone was quarried on site by the prisoners who would eventually live behind those walls, a detail that reflects the harsh reality of the place. Rising like a fortress, the walls and guard towers gave Joliet a medieval appearance that made it unlike most prisons in America. For more than a century, it held inmates, and a congressional inspection in the later years of its operation described conditions as dark, damp, and outdated. Even after it closed, the prison found a second life on screen, with filmmakers drawn to the very atmosphere that once made it feared. Its appearance became so recognisable through movies like The Blues Brothers that visitors began travelling long distances just to see the famous entrance. Stone takes on a gentler role along Minnesota's North Shore, where waterfalls tumble through a basalt gorge before reaching Lake Superior at Gooseberry Falls State Park. Few parks offer so many cascades within such an easy reach, and Gooseberry Falls delivers a series of drops just steps from the trailhead. The Gooseberry River moves through the gorge in stages, flowing over upper, middle and lower falls before joining Lake Superior below. Beyond the waterfalls, the park is known for its craftsmanship. Civilian Conservation Corps crews built many of its structures during the Depression, using local granite to create bridges, walls, and the massive river barrier known as the castle in the park. When winter arrives, the falls transform into frozen columns, and the gorge becomes a world of ice, with the same stonework framing a completely new scene. Prairie towns have their own way of building monuments, and one South Dakota city has been recreating its most famous attraction out of corn year after year. The Corn Palace is exactly what it sounds like, and somehow more. Every year, a crew strips the murals off the building and puts up new ones using more than 250,000 ears of corn, each ear sawed in half lengthwise to create a flat side, then nailed to the wall by hand. The kernels are never dyed. It comes in 12 natural colours including red, brown, black, blue, calico and green, all grown by one nearby farmer and arranged like a giant paint-by-numbers on roofing paper. The process requires thousands of nails and months of preparation, drawing visitors from across the country to see a building unlike any other. Elsewhere in Wisconsin, a hidden landmark waits at the end of a gravel road where a river drops through the forest, once earning a place among CNN's 10 most spectacular waterfalls in the country. Potato River Falls has no visitor centre or paved approach, just a gravel road, 2 sets of stairs, and a waterfall that drops through tiers in the northern Wisconsin forest. The upper falls come first, reached by a steep stairway from the parking area, where water splits into several drops before continuing to the lower falls below, with the climb back up as the price of the view. Every drop of that water eventually finds Lake Superior, but the largest river in this part of the country runs the other direction entirely, cutting south through 6 states toward the Mississippi. The Missouri River is the longest river in North America, and for most of American history, it was the road west. Before the railroads, everything that moved into the interior moved on this water. Fur traders, steamboats, expeditions, and the wagon parties that outfitted in Missouri River towns before heading overland. The river carved the route, and the settlements that grew along it, Omaha and Kansas City and Bismarck among them, grew because of where the water went. It still runs wide and brown and heavy with silt, which is where its old nickname came from. They called it the Big Muddy. Dredgers still work the channel to keep it navigable, and the bridges that cross it, rail and pedestrian and highway, mark the places where the crossing mattered enough to build for. It drains a basin larger than any other in the country, and from the air, the way it moves through the plains makes it obvious why everything else out here is organised around it. The river defines life across the plains, and Wind Cave National Park offers a look beneath that surface into a world carved by water and time. This cave seems to breathe. That is not a figure of speech. Air moves through Wind Cave's natural entrance strongly enough to feel, pushing outward in gusts before reversing as outside pressure changes. Inside, the cave preserves one of its rarest features: boxwork, delicate calcite formations that create a honeycomb pattern found here in remarkable abundance. Above the surface, the park stretches into open prairie, where American bison graze as descendants of the herds remembered in those traditions. These massive animals can weigh as much as a small car, with shaggy brown coats, powerful shoulders, and curved horns that give them their unmistakable profile. At Wind Cave, herds move slowly across the prairie, using their broad heads to sweep aside snow and vegetation as they feed on grasses, while their grazing helps shape the open habitat around them. The population here exists because conservation efforts gave bison room to recover after their numbers declined dramatically, allowing them to once again roam the plains where they had long lived. A herd crossing the road reveals their calm nature. Despite their size and strength, they move with surprising patience, often stopping traffic simply because they choose to take their time. Sharing the grasslands is an animal adapted to a unique challenge: the pronghorn, a creature built for speed and open country. Often mistaken for an antelope, this animal is actually unique to North America, with no close relatives among true antelopes and a lineage more closely connected to giraffes. Its slender body, long legs, oversized eyes and branching horns make it perfectly suited for spotting danger across wide stretches of prairie. Here, pronghorns move across the open grasslands in small groups, feeding on grasses, leaves and low-growing plants as they travel between grazing areas. Unlike many hoofed animals, they can shed the outer part of their horns each year, a rare trait setting them apart from other horned mammals. Their incredible speed likely evolved during a much older era when faster predators roamed the continent, leaving behind one of the most remarkable runners on the modern prairie. Lighthouses measure time differently than prairie animals do, and Michigan's oldest has guided ships into one of the busiest waterways on Earth since before the state was a state. The Fort Gratiot Lighthouse now guides vessels where Lake Huron narrows into the St. Clair River, replacing the original light station lost to a storm along one of the Great Lakes' busiest shipping corridors. Visitors can climb the active tower for views of the Blue Water Bridge, passing freighters, and the narrow waterway that has kept this beacon essential for generations. Meanwhile, Indiana keeps its largest body of water inland, and considerably calmer, wrapped in forest just outside Bloomington. Monroe Lake spans 10,000 acres, with wooded shores, empty coves, and room for boats, anglers, and paddlers to spread out. Bloomington is close enough that the lake functions as the city's backyard, but big enough that finding an empty cove is rarely difficult. Marinas play a similar role farther north on Lake Huron, where Harbour Park Marina opens onto one of the lake's most protected bays. Tawas Bay curves behind a long sandy point, forming natural protection that creates calmer waters for boaters while keeping the open lake within reach. During summer, sailboats fill the harbour, and the relaxed waterfront offers a quiet contrast to the powerful waters beyond the bay. Protected bays become towering cliffs at Tetagouche State Park, where Lake Superior meets dense forests and dramatic rock formations. Climbers work routes on that face, with the water directly below them. Beyond that, the park continues with remote inland lakes, a century-old camp on Micmac Lake, sea caves along a hidden beach, and trails climbing to views of the Sawtooth Mountains inland. But the thing that makes people pull over on Highway 61 is a wall of rock at the water's edge just south of the park entrance. Palisade Head towers above Lake Superior as a sheer cliff of volcanic rock, with a drop so direct that the lake appears almost straight below from the summit. The road reaches the top, creating one of the rare places where a dramatic cliffside view requires no long hike, only a short walk to the edge of one of the Great Lakes' most powerful coastal views. Climbers trace routes across the vertical columns of rock, while waves crash far below, following cracks formed by volcanic activity from a time when this region looked nothing like it does today. The cliff is part of a rare geological formation, with dark columns creating one of the most distinctive rock faces along the shore. On clear days, the overlook reveals an endless horizon where water seems to merge with the sky, and the true scale of the lake becomes impossible to ignore. The power of water takes a different form at Cuyahoga Valley National Park, where the Cuyahoga River went from a river so polluted it repeatedly caught fire. Industrial waste coated the river so heavily that a passing spark could ignite it, and when it happened, the images spread worldwide and helped drive the creation of the Clean Water Act. The land along the river was stripped, dumped on, and abandoned. What the river runs through now is a national park with a different mission, not protecting untouched land, but restoring what was damaged. Brandywine Falls drops into a wooded gorge. The towpath trail follows the route where mules once pulled canal boats, and the Ledges Trail winds beneath rock walls that look unlike anywhere else in Ohio. The path from environmental recovery leads toward Keystone, where a former gold rush settlement became a gateway to one of the country's most recognised monuments. The town began when William Franklin struck gold and named his claim the Holy Terror Mine, after his wife known for pulling him away from the local saloons. He joked with fellow miners that she was a holy terror, and the name stuck as the mine became one of the region's most productive gold producers. Keystone quickly grew into a booming mining town, with hotels, saloons, and a railroad built to support the rush of workers and fortune seekers. Its success did not last. The mine flooded, legal battles followed over underground deaths, and repeated fires eventually erased much of the business district. Stories persist that gold still remains underground, but the challenge of draining the flooded workings has kept those deposits beyond reach. The silence of abandoned mines finds a new form across North Dakota's Badlands, where towering formations, bison, and wild horses create a world best seen from above. Here, the Little Missouri River carved the Badlands into bands of grey, rust, and gold, where bison roam the draws, wild horses cross the ridgelines, and sunsets near Medora leave a lasting impression. The open country holds centuries of native history, and Crazy Horse Memorial brings one of those stories into stone on a monumental scale. That vision began when Lakota elder Henry Standing Bear asked sculptor Korczak Zielkowski to honour the heroes and history of the Lakota people, leading to a lifelong project carved from the mountain. The power of stone meets the power of water, with Tukwamenon Falls flowing through one of the Midwest's most recognisable forests. Its water carries an unusual colour, not muddy or polluted, but a clear golden brown like strong tea held to the light, while the foam gathering below the falls resembles the head of a root beer float. Known locally as Root Beer Falls, the shade comes from tannins released by the cedar, spruce and hemlock swamps, where the Tukwamenon River begins. The upper falls stretch across a broad rock ledge and create one of the largest waterfall displays east of the Mississippi, with powerful flows that change dramatically through the seasons. A trail leads visitors close to the edge, where mist rises from the plunge pool and the force of the river can be felt before it is seen. Farther downstream, the lower falls divide around an island where visitors can row between smaller cascades and experience the river at a gentler pace. The forest surrounding all of it belongs to another resident of the Upper Peninsula, the American black bear. They roam the woodlands around the Tukwamenon River, with this region supporting one of the strongest populations in Michigan. Despite their reputation, they usually avoid conflict. A bear's instinct when encountering people is often to retreat, slipping into the trees before most visitors ever realise it was there. Cubs remain with their mother through their early development, following her through the forest as they learn where to find berries, insects, roots, and other seasonal foods. Young bears spend much of their time playing, wrestling with siblings, climbing fallen trees, and practicing the movements they will rely on as adults. A mother bear teaches by example, guiding her cubs through the changing seasons until they are ready to explore the forest on their own. Seeing a sow and her cubs searching a berry patch in late summer, completely focused on feeding, is the kind of encounter many visitors hope for, but few experience. The bears are here, but whether they reveal themselves is entirely their decision. Natural world moves through seasons and survival, and Independence Temple carries a vision centered on unity, peace, and spiritual connection. Its design began with an unusual request. The architect asked to see seashells during a meeting and chose one as inspiration for the temple's defining shape. Rising above a small Missouri city, the stainless steel spiral twists upward like a shell, creating a structure that looks more like a work of sculpture than a traditional place of worship. Inside, the spiral continues overhead, with the sanctuary ceiling curving like a nautilus shell and creating acoustics where sound lingers after the music ends. Built before digital tools simplified complex construction, the temple relied on careful measurements, hand calculations, and constant coordination as the panels came together. Belonging to the community of Christ, the temple was created around a single purpose: the pursuit of peace. Each day, a prayer for peace is offered here, recognizing a different nation in a tradition that continues around the world. Northern Minnesota answers with its own kind of stillness on Pelican Lake, where the only sound most mornings is a loon calling out across the water. The lake supports walleye and northern pike among its weed beds, while pine, birch and tucked-away cabins line a shoreline that still feels closely connected to the surrounding forest. What draws people here most, however, is the voice of the loons, whose haunting calls travel across the water at dusk and seem to come from somewhere beyond sight. Water follows a new course 40 miles northeast, where Caribou Falls sends the region's rivers off the highlands and toward Lake Superior. Hidden just beyond a small roadside pull-off, the falls reveal themselves after a forest trail and a descent into the gorge, where the Caribou River drops over rock into a sheltered pool surrounded by spruce and birch. The movement of water connects forests, rivers and shorelines, leading to Tawas Point Lighthouse, a beacon built to guide ships through one of the lake's busiest routes. its white brick tower and black lantern rise above the sandy point, creating one of Lake Huron's most recognisable silhouettes. Wisconsin routes its scenery through sandstone instead, where the Wisconsin River carved its own corridor through the rock. For much of its course, it flows like a typical Midwestern river until it reaches the sandstone cliffs of the Wisconsin Dells. There, the channel winds through a narrow gorge where towering Cambrian sandstone walls rise above the water, broken by hidden canyons, overhangs, and narrow passages. Landmarks such as Stand Rock, Chimney Rock, Devil's Elbow, and the Jaws reflect generations of travellers who named the formations they encountered along the way. Overhead bald eagles and turkey vultures ride the updrafts while pines cling to the cliff faces, rooted in cracks where little else can grow. Scattered islands divide the river into quiet side channels and sheltered coves, making this stretch one of Wisconsin's most rewarding places to explore by kayak or canoe. Ohio hides its own retreat behind a long oak-lined driveway where Jeffrey Mansion was built with a coal equipment fortune and later given to the community. Built in the Jacobean Revival style, the estate combines stone architecture, formal gardens and surrounding woods, reflecting on the owner's love of design before he donated the property to the city of Bexley. Roads end at the edge of Voyageurs National Park, where lakes and narrow channels become the highways through the northern forest, and much of the park can only be reached by boat. A network of interconnected lakes, islands and winding waterways stretches across the border region, where boats replace cars as the primary way to travel. The park takes its name from the French-Canadian canoemen who moved furs through this border country in enormous birch bark canoes, and the routes they paddled ended up defining the line between two countries. Campsites here are boat access only, which means arriving at one is a small commitment. At night, the reason people book those sites becomes obvious. Voyageurs is a certified international dark sky park, far from city lights, and far enough north for the aurora to regularly twist across the sky in green and yellow ribbons over open water. In winter, when the lakes freeze solid, the Park Service opens ice roads across Rainy Lake, and cars drive on the water. Something else moves through these forests in packs, and it has been doing something here that nobody had ever filmed before. Grey wolves travel this country in family packs, and voyageurs have become one of the most closely watched wolf populations in North America. Researchers have collared wolves from 7 packs and placed hundreds of trail cameras through the woods, and what they found changed part of what people thought they knew. The wolves fish. Every spring, when suckers move into the small creeks to spawn, wolves come down to the water and wait, motionless on stream banks and beaver dams under the cover of darkness, listening. Wolves are supposed to be deer and moose hunters, and they still are. The forests open onto Mackinac City, a place defined by the narrow passage connecting two of the Great Lakes, and generations of travellers passing through. "5 miles of suspension bridge begin here and reach the upper peninsula, while ferries depart for Mackinac Island all summer and the town runs on traffic moving both ways. At the water's edge, old Mackinac Point Lighthouse has watched this crossing since long before the bridge existed. Its beacon went dark in 1957 when a new navigation system changed the way ships navigated the straits. The Mackinac Bridge opened that year, its illuminated span providing the guidance the lighthouse had offered for decades, allowing the light to be retired after years of faithful service. Today, the cream brick tower and keeper's quarters remain behind a white picket fence, restored for visitors, with the bridge rising prominently in the background. High ground has long offered the clearest view, and Grandad Bluff rises above the surrounding valleys, with one of the region's best overlooks. The bluff came close to disappearing after quarrying stripped away its limestone and much of its forest, leaving the hillside scarred beyond recognition. Its future changed when a local family bought the land, stopped the quarrying, and later donated it as a public park, preserving sweeping views across the Mississippi Valley and 3 states. Water remained central to the growth of Midwestern towns, and Wyandotte developed beside a river that carried ships, commerce and industry for generations. Its name comes from the Wyandotte people, who settled along the Detroit River after recognizing the area's abundant fishing, diverse wildlife and fertile soil. Generations later, entrepreneur Eber Ward transformed the waterfront into a centre of iron production, setting the stage for one of the country's most important industrial milestones. At Eureka Ironworks, the nation's first commercial Bessemer steel ingots and rails were produced, helping launch the steel that would shape railroads, bridges, and growing cities across America. Shipbuilding soon joined the riverfront economy, with local yards launching hundreds of vessels and introducing designs that influenced the industry well beyond Michigan. The activity became such a part of daily life that schools sometimes paused so children could watch new ships slide into the river. Although the furnaces and shipyards eventually fell silent, freighters still passed the waterfront, linking Wyandotte to the waterway that first gave the city its purpose. In contrast, Missouri keeps a much smaller body of water tucked into its rural interior at Hubler Lake. This lake is small, and that is the entire appeal. There is no marina, no crowd, No reason to come here, except that the water is calm and the surrounding country is rural enough that most days nobody else shows up. Fishing, paddling, and doing nothing are the available activities, and in Missouri's rural interior, that combination is worth more than it sounds. On a different scale, faith shaped one of the region's most remarkable landmarks, and the Cathedral of St. Paul stands among the finest examples of American cathedral architecture. Behind the altar, 6 chapels form a graceful semicircle, each dedicated to one of the immigrant communities that helped build the city. Italian, French-Canadian, Irish, German, Slavic, and missionary traditions each created their own chapel, complete with patron saints, stained glass, and marble chosen to reflect their culture. Together they became known as the Shrine of Nations, weaving the city's many cultures into the fabric of a single cathedral. Time leaves its mark in countless forms, and Toadstool Geologic Park preserves rock formations carved over countless ages by wind and rain. Few people realise Nebraska has its own Badlands, hidden within the Oglala National Grassland. There, wind and water have sculpted soft clay and sandstone into towering stone toadstools, where broad rock caps rest on narrow pillars worn away over time. Bands of red, green and other colours run through the formations, traces of old volcanic ash that settled here when rivers once crossed this now dry region. Life gathers around the water at Grand Marais, a harbour town known for its artists, working waterfront, and gateway to the wild country beyond. Set along the northern shore of Minnesota, it has earned a reputation far beyond its size, recognised as one of the country's most memorable small towns and outdoor escapes. Its appeal comes from an unusual combination: a natural harbour on Lake Superior, a well-established art scene, and a downtown of galleries, shops and restaurants that feels far larger than expected. The Ojibwe called this place Parallel Body of Water, a reference to the 2 bays that form the harbour, while French voyageurs later gave it the name Grand Marais, or Sheltered Water. From here, the Gunflint Trail winds into the northern forest toward the Boundary Waters, passing through some of the most remote country in the region. At the end of the harbour breakwall, Grand Marais Lighthouse watches over the shoreline, facing whatever Lake Superior sends its way. The small red-capped beacon offers open water views, though waves can make the path dangerous when conditions turn rough. When the sun drops behind the Sawtooth Mountains, the lighthouse becomes one of the town's most recognisable views, drawing photographers to capture the meeting of water, sky and shore. Michigan has its own account of what this water does to those who cross it, and on its western shore, Sleeping Bear Dunes. National Lakeshore preserves the legend of a mother bear still waiting. Ojibwe tradition tells of a forest fire that drove a mother bear and her 2 cubs into Lake Michigan, forcing them into a desperate swim for the far shore. After reaching land, the mother climbed a bluff searching for her cubs, but they vanished beneath the waves, and she waited until the Great Spirit Manitou covered her in sand. From that legend came North and South Manitou Islands, said to mark where the cubs disappeared and are still visible offshore from the dune named for their mother. In southern Illinois, Cairo sits where the Ohio and Mississippi rivers meet, a strategic point that once powered its rise through steamboats, railroads, and military campaigns. Mark Twain made Cairo the destination in Huckleberry Finn, where Jim hoped to reach free territory, though he and Huck floated past it in the fog without knowing. Today, the town's empty storefronts and fading 19th century buildings stand in contrast to Fort Defiance, where the rivers still flow past a place that history left behind. The meeting of 2 great rivers gives way to Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park, where weathered ridges and old-growth forests stretch across one of the planet's oldest mountain ranges. Michigan's largest state park covers thousands of acres in the western Upper Peninsula, protecting one of the largest remaining blocks of northern hardwood forest in North America. At the centre is Lake of the Clouds, a lake that draws visitors from across the country to see its sweeping views. The lake rests between 2 forested ridges, its narrow blue waters stretching through a valley that has become one of the Upper Peninsula's most photographed scenes. Its shape resembles a cut gemstone set into the forest, with colours shifting from emerald green in spring to red and orange across the ridges in autumn. The overlook itself sits on the worn remains of a long-eroded volcanic ridge where immense forces carved the peaceful view over time. A different side of the region appears at Governor Dodge State Park, where forested hills and hidden water fill land the glaciers never reached. The park rests in Wisconsin's driftless area, a region the last glaciers bypassed, leaving behind hills, valleys, and exposed rock while surrounding areas were flattened. Across thousands of acres, 2 lakes sit between wooded ridges, with sandstone outcrops and trails winding through prairie, oak forest, and steep valleys. Southern Wisconsin trades those wooded hills for a new setting, Lake Geneva, a glacial lake ringed with mansions. The town became a resort almost by accident after wealthy Chicago families, displaced by the Great Chicago Fire, began building summer homes along the clear waters north of the city. Those mansions still line the shore, but the lake's most unusual feature may be the public footpath that circles it, passing directly through the front yards of these historic estates. Following an old Potawatomi trail, the route survived decades of efforts to close it and remains open to everyone. Across the plains of South Dakota, one mountain stands apart from the prairie, and Bear Butte State Park has been a place of prayer for generations. Rising alone from the grasslands, Bear Butte towers above the plains, with a summit trail lined by prayer cloths and tobacco ties placed by those seeking guidance. Beyond the sacred sites and protected lands, farming defines this region more than anything else, covering much of the country between them. The Midwest produces more food than almost any other place on Earth, powered by conditions that are difficult to match. In summer, satellite measurements have shown the Corn Belt from Ohio to Nebraska can produce more plant activity than even the Amazon rainforest during peak growing months. Iowa alone now grows more corn than the entire United States produced in 1900, with some counties in Iowa and Illinois producing more crops than entire nations. The secret lies beneath the fields. Black mollisol soil, built from prairie grasses over thousands of years, combined with warm days, humid nights and rainfall timed with the growing season. Most farms working this ground remain family operations, but what they grow changes with the region the road is crossing. One crop turns the open fields into a sea of gold each summer, with sunflowers following the rhythm of the prairie and the farm calendar. Kansas calls itself the Sunflower State, and driving past a mature field in late summer explains why immediately. The flowers here grow tall enough to block the horizon, and because young sunflowers track the sun across the sky, an entire field faces the same direction at the same time, thousands of heads turned in unison. By harvest they lock east and stay there. That fertile ground that supports towering flowers also produces wheat, the crop that transformed open prairie into one of the world's great grain regions. That fertile ground that supports towering flowers also produces wheat, the crop that transformed open prairie into one of the world's great grain regions. Kansas grows more wheat than any other state, enough in a typical year to produce billions of loaves of bread. Winter wheat is planted in autumn, emerges green, survives beneath the snow, and finishes its growth when spring returns. By June, the fields turn gold as combines move across the plains from before sunrise until after dark. The state's nickname may come from sunflowers, but wheat built Kansas, and the grain elevators rising above small towns across the plains show the scale of its impact. The Midwest's agricultural power extends far beyond a single crop, with farms producing food, fuel, livestock feed, and resources on a massive scale. Corn dominates the eastern half of the region, and much of it never reaches a dinner table, instead becoming ethanol that can power cars in cities like Chicago from fields just miles away. North Dakota turns to hay, with round bales scattered across harvested fields into autumn. In Wisconsin, cranberry marshes are flooded each fall, sending berries floating to the surface in a sea of red. Door County's cherry orchards burst into white bloom every May, producing some of the country's finest tart cherries. Across Indiana and Iowa, wind turbines now rise above cornfields, generating energy while crops continue growing below. The same ground can serve multiple purposes at once. And the productivity of these fields includes more than crops, with Midwestern pastures supporting one of the largest cattle industries in the country. Cattle graze land that crops cannot use, from rough grasslands in Kansas and Missouri to the open plains farther west. Wisconsin's dairy herds made the state famous for cheese, while western beef operations rely on grasslands better suited for grazing than planting. A herd crossing open pasture moves at its own pace, slow and steady across the land. Grain, grass and livestock spread across thousands of miles of open country reveal the foundation beneath everything else the Midwest has built. This is the Midwest region of the USA, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of southern Appalachia, check out this video.